Hi everybody, it's Cori at the Reset Girl, and welcome to week 6 of the Pocket Art Challenge. I am ready for today's pocket. We are week 6. We're looking at doing a list. A list. That sounds familiar. If you have followed me for a bit, you would remember Lister's Got a List. This was my original little crafting challenge that I hosted for quite a few years. And this is an opportunity to showcase a list of anything that you can think of and kind of document it, showcase your list in some form or fashion in a pocket, essentially. So I want to share with you my process on this one because I think sometimes that's kind of important. I'm doing a lot of prep work behind the scenes, which you don't get to see. And so I wanted you to kind of get a glimpse into like, here's how this prompt came together. I appreciate knowing stuff like that. How did somebody get there? So this is what it looked like for me. Now, every week I am always having to accommodate a pocket from the week before. So this was my baby pocket from last week. So I know I have to do one baby pocket piece, and it's usually been my pattern to use this as where I put the prompt itself. So I know that's going to happen. This week I was this week I decided I wanted to do just one giant pocket. Now, that might seem like a cop-out because I think the first thing we tend to think of is like, oh, you just put a single image in there and you're done. And you can do that. There's no reason why you can't. But you could also use this as an opportunity to kind of build a bigger piece, if you will, that then you would tuck into the pocket. With that in mind, I kind of started sketching out things that I wanted to do. This was my whole little plan for this week. I wanted you to see like what kind of thought that I put into it. So my baby pocket, I originally kind of thought, well, what if I do these big giant letters that say list and they're sort of vertically arranged on the page? And then I started thinking about it and thinking like, well, what materials do I have? Do I actually have large letters? You know, and then I thought about my stickers. Do I have alphas that are like big? And I actually do. So then that caused me to start looking at different papers for the baby pocket. And then I came up with this particular piece, which is one of my 6x4 pieces that I had pre-cut. And here's my gold alpha stickers that I cut out of the sheet. This kind of gave me an idea of how I could arrange my baby pocket. So I know that this is going to be on one side of my spread. That kind of fulfills this plan. I am going to embellish. I'm going to try embellishing it. I have an idea of using a white jelly roll pen to sort of embellish this lower bottom. I hope it works out, but we'll see. This would be one side of my spread. So knowing that took care of the first part of what I was conceptualizing. And then I started thinking about the bigger piece. So knowing that I need to have some kind of background to do anything on it that needs to be rather solid, somewhat benign. It's not going to compete in any way. I went through my paper stash, and what I found in there was these 2 pieces of scrap paper I had glued front to back and was planning on using this as a divider. However, after looking through the rest of my collection, I couldn't find another sheet of this wood grain paper, and I really like it for this project. I decided I'm just going to use it for this. So I cut it down so it will fit in my pocket. It'll be like this for this week's challenge, and then next week I will be working on the back side, but I know that I have this to work with. That's kind of nice that that's all set up for me. So the first part of this pocket is established now, so I have this to work with. So then of course, back to my sketch. I have done a few different things that have really inspired me in the past. I have been using my old work to sort of inspire my new work. At the beginning of 2020, we hosted what we called the Harmony Retreat, and it was fantastic. Probably my favorite of all the different retreats, camps that I've done. in terms of its content. And this particular page I did in this kind of a more fancy, crafty type of bullet journal. This is the Harmony Handbook. I made this page, and this was, I believe this was the first time that I had sort of configured the page this way with like photos of food. This is part of my health section. And so I incorporated more so photos of like healthy looking food, and just the overall, everything that I did, including like creating this, using this empty space and sort of creating the little dotted line so it represents its own little hexagon, just the whole thing. I love this. It kind of takes my breath away a little bit every time I open it and look at it. I loved it. It's one of my favorite things that I ever made. I still come back and look at it. So I wanted to use this as my inspiration for how I was going to build this week's pocket. That is how I went into this particular pocket inspiration. I've also made another page where I used a diamond shape, but after I gave it some thought, I decided I wanted to go with this version of it. Now, I had used a punch for this project, and try as I might, I could not find it, so I had to improvise. I did end up making my own little hexagon shape with, as I've talked about, these clear mats. Let me show you what they look like. These come from the Dollar Tree, and you can find them in the kitchen section. There's 2 mats to a pack for, you know, the $1-ish price. And I love using these to make notebook covers, journal covers. They're really wonderful disc bound covers. Fantastic. But you always end up with some extra pieces when you do that, so they are really fun to cut up. And I have talked about these little photo crops, I think, at the very beginning of our of this video series, and I ended up using them to make a larger shape that would just be a lot easier to work with. So that's how I ended up with this, and rather than a punch, and the finished paper ended up being quite the same. Now, that was the step before this one. So let me show you what happened next. I went through my paper stash and I started cutting up all the paper that I love and playing with my layout. This is a general idea of what it might look like. I'm working with a much larger target with this more letter size paper pad. I actually love the background. I wish I could just tear off the cover and use it. I might end up using this cover for another project now that I've seen it in action. It's really cool. This is actually a paper pad ledger paper. I just think it looks really neat. That's a side issue. I'm using this as kind of like my test pattern, way of working it out, what it can generally look like. I'll shift things around until I kind of have a good balance. Just even now that I've said that, I can see that I have grouped a lot more teal up here than down here. So this is that thing where we did last week where I start playing around. And you know what's funny? After last week's video, I forgot to mention this, I did end up changing things after I filmed it. I asked Mark about the video, and he said, "Oh, I was hoping you would use the green ticket." And I hadn't, right? I'd used the yellow one. So I actually tore off the yellow one and replaced it with the green. And I actually do think it probably does look better. Once I started watching the video, I was like, there's a lot of changes I made that I was actually happier with some of the earlier choices I'd made. So it's kind of funny. But I love it. And it's the same principle we're doing here. So it's the same thing. We're playing around, we're shifting things around. These shapes have different emphases. So like on this particular shape, as an example, you see there's more mustard over here versus pink. And those are just things you can shift depending on the design. You can shift the pink in that direction or this direction so that you have more balance. Like I said, there's a little bit more blue up here. I don't know if it really makes a difference, but playing around with things, as you have seen, it can be kind of a delicate balance. If you play around with something too much, you may regret it. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple things that I did here that I just think are, interesting. You might want to try out some of those. I think that helps. Again, I feel like this might be that situation where I want to throw that balance back there. Yeah, I like that better. Okay. All right, so there you go. So playing around to me is part of the fun. It's something that I really enjoy, and I kind of look at it as a facet of strengthening your eye, your the way it's laid out. What can you, like, you can gather a lot of data just from what you see here. There were a lot of things that I did before I arrived here. So one of the things is realizing that you can cut any of these hexagons right up the middle and use the other side to create a whole new piece. So for instance, this originally was a full image of a camera. I cut one of my hexagons in half, and now it's a half a camera with an interesting mustard stripe. This is from, I think this is from the back side. Yep, it's the back side. This is Poolside from Crepe Paper, another favorite paper that I really, really like. I'm trying to keep too much cream from kind of clumping together. I'm trying to create space between some of the elements because they're special. Like this is actually a piece of cork. It's very thin cork paper with an adhesive back. This is such a fun material to use. So I want to make sure that that and the gold glitter piece of the hexagon are separate. I want to make sure that this image and this image and this image have space too. You want your eye to be able to kind of cruise around over the paper. Here's another photograph. So you want to make sure that you're creating enough space that they stand out. You want to keep the colors so they're not all clumped together. And so just one thing I can recommend and that I did is I actually took a picture. If you're afraid of making too many changes and you won't know your way back, taking a picture can be very helpful. It's like having your breadcrumbs and you can get back to where you were in case you're not sure if you're kind of new to paper piecing and bringing different patterns and colors together. It might feel a little scary. So if you photograph it first, you will have more confidence in shifting things around. The other thing you may notice here is that I have these half shapes. And I also have these holes. So because I am working on a smaller piece of paper, once I start getting those in place, you're going to see me kind of shifting this, which you see here is going to have to shift to a smaller. I might have to cut the pieces down. And what I'm trying to do is create a kind of visual stopping point. So like pretend that there's a line, an imaginary line going up the page so that on this side I'm going to have the dark wood grain still showing, and then there's this line that just sort of hacked it down here. Same thing over here. So we just want to see a strip of all of these little paper patterns. So you see that kind of idea in this example here where I kind of did the same thing. I pretended that I was making a strip of these diamond patterns. So you have to end up cutting the pieces in half on each side to create that strip. They can't just stick out all willy-nilly. That doesn't create that lovely line. So at some point, something's going to have to start getting cut so that you can create this nice straight line on either side. Here's another example where this is actually like a fake grass. That's another material that's really fun. So the cork, the grass, and the glitter are three of my favorite kind of unusual materials to work with that have, just been super fun. Primarily, I've used them in our crafting camps. That's really why I actually have them, is because I've bought them for those reasons. So this is another example. This was, I think I made this in 2019. This is from Camp Wannacraft. Very beloved, this whole thing, doing this. It was one of my favorite things I ever came up with to do in my little projects. So I being a one-trick pony as I am, I'm always looking for a way to reuse those beloved techniques. So that's what I wanted to do today. Now, all that to say, doing this has kind of, you may be wondering, how is this a list? So when I conceptualized doing this, what I went in knowing is I'm going to use some of these hexagons to basically house a word strip. I haven't officially cut the word strips in a certain way. I was kind of trying to figure out, do they need to be cut differently or anything like that. I made sure to have lots of options the way that they're cut. So they're kind of sloppy right now, but they're going to get cut down. So essentially, only some of these hexagons can I really use as a background for a word strip, and intentionally so. Some of these I really want them to shine and not necessarily have one. So it's like a random pattern of word strips. So I have 8 word strips, and when we get there, I will tell you what all these little word strips, what these words mean, what the list actually is. But before I can do that, I need to start the construction. So we got a lot of crafting to go. I'm probably going to work on my list pocket first. Now that I've explained to you the process, what my thoughts were, how I was kind of setting this all up for success, now I'm going to go and actually start doing the construction part of the baby pocket, pocket A. So I'm just going to go ahead and play some music while I work, and you can listen along with me. Okay, so now I'm moving here, and I'm trying to decide how I normally start these projects. Is I normally start from either the top or the bottom as working my way into building this. I also wanted to point out that when you are working with paper, a lot of times it's a good idea to kind of pay attention to the nuances in the paper. You can see looking at this one that there's much darker side down here than lighter up here. It doesn't really make a big difference in this particular project, but I do like to point it out because it can make a difference in other projects. So I just like to pay attention to things like that. So I'm going to start transferring these. Now my hope is that I am going to be able to have some of what I call more of like a white space, but I need to kind of determine how much space I actually do have. So one thing I like to do is kind of work with placement of my little pieces. And I like to start at, like I said, at the top or bottom, and then kind of judge how much of this I want to shift up or down. So for instance, I don't like starting, this isn't what, I would not do this. In other words, I wouldn't start with the edge pieces. I wouldn't start them right there at the end. I like to kind of either make them in the middle, make them more towards the bottom. I just like to, why do I do that? That's a good question. Why do I have a tendency of doing that? I have just found that, I don't know. That's a good question, Cori. Why do you do that? Now that I'm thinking about it, after having done this enough times, I feel like that's just sort of like best practices, is kind of starting at maybe an odd. Everything is movable, shiftable. It's nothing's set in stone. We've glued nothing down, so everything can be moved at this point. But I feel like that's just kind of what I like to do. So because these paper sizes are very different where it's going to, I do feel like I need to mess around with these and decide where's the chopping off point. So by that I mean, does the pattern end right here, like at this edge, or should it move even further in? If that's the case, then obviously this piece doesn't work there. But that's what I want to ask myself, is how much white space do I believe needs to be included here. So we're going to continue. I just think the hexagon is such a cool shape. You just end up with something so interesting. This little girl here, she's another example. She's actually one of a pair of girls, but as you can see, when you just leave them be, what ends up happening is, in my eye, literally, I see competition between these two. There's a lot of people here, there's multiple people here. My eye is pinging and ponging back and forth. But if I cover her up like this, and I'm not going to cover, I'm actually going to cut her off and use her in another project in the future. Suddenly, these two don't feel like they're in such competition. Somehow that made a big difference in kind of creating a little bit more peace. It's more peaceful now. Well, you know how teenagers are. They're just noisy. So I am now, so this particular image, when I'm putting it up there, realizing it's going to get cut off, that's my next question to myself is, okay, if I do put it up there, what am I actually going to see once I cut it? I'm just going to see this little road. Is that enough image to make sense? Does it look weird if I have to cut it? Well, am I better off moving it into another piece of the pattern where it's less crucial? So, as for example, because these are so pale, they're both in the kind of a grayscale with more cream on this one, but that still has kind of a light background. Is that a better deal to do something like that? So playing around with things at this moment, because now it's getting real. Things are really going to get cut down at this point. And as you can see, I'm going to end up cutting these here approximately the same amount here too. So let me show you the difference. When I first did this and I didn't know those little rules, you can see here these got cut at a really weird cutting off point, almost like their little rooftops were cut off. And then down here the roofs are here. So they're not as evenly cut. Now, that's not a huge deal, and I'm not suggesting that you stress about these things. I primarily, when we do these things, we want to be having fun and not worried about being perfect, worried about getting it right. I'm just pointing out from my previous doing this, it's like, well, if I know better, that, you know, that could have been done better. I'm certainly I'm gonna try to make effort to do it better the next time I do it. So that's why I'm pointing it out. But please know, everybody starts somewhere. If you've never tried it before, that you should have no expectation that you're gonna nail it on the first try. And honestly, getting it perfect or getting it a certain way, that to me is really it's a byproduct of how much fun I had putting this together in the first place. This brings me such joy looking at these little pieces, the colors, the fun, like these little joyful people here. She looks happy with her little rosy cheeks. This is a joyful, colorful kind of pattern. So, okay, so now I am playing around a little bit more because now, like I said, it's gotten real and now things are really going to lay out a certain way. So here's an example of like where I might move things because now I can see the gaps. There's like 2 holes right here. Also, I don't want to forget, one of my plans that I had was to leave one of these spots open to build that fun little empty space. That was actually something I was hoping to do. So like I did here, where this is empty and yet it has, you know, I used it to put an element there. So I do want to, I would like to, which is a little painful. That means somebody's got to go. And I think, I don't know, the way this lays out. So let me just point something out to you. If I didn't cut these and I just let them be, now I have this odd strip right here that would be uncovered. So that would be weird. So it's like it's too, it doesn't work well. How do I say this? It's like I have to move this in here. I have to move my line in here in order to make that strip that's all just wood, in order to make that look intentional, in order to make it look really clean and nice, I have to move my line here. Building out the whole thing is going to be a very odd layout because it's a little bit too, can I just show you? Let me just show you what I'm saying. So approximately everything in here, let's just kind of shift a little bit. So this is what would happen. Can you see what I'm saying? If keeping the spacing the way that it is, I would end up having this weird little tiny strip of paper right there. This one's a full hexagon, but this one is this little teeny blip. That would look odd to me. That looks weird. I'm already happy that I got the ones down here and up here. I got them to kind of be more even. So I'm going to call that a win and I'm not going to push it. So I'm just going to cut these hexagons in half and I'm going to call the end right there. So that's another thing to be aware of. Now, listen, a lazy crafter here. So I'm just explaining it to you from my little limited Cori perspective. If you are used to, you know, you're more of a ruler person, you're more precise, more exact, you might be, the way you look at things, you might be doing the math. This is a 6x8 and I'm going to lay these out and I'm going to, you know, I think there are people like that. Bless your heart. But I'm eyeballing it. And so all I can say is this is approximate in how I figure things out, and you might have a super better system than that. And if so, you do it. You run with it. You be best friends with it. But some of us are on the struggle bus. I just don't have that type of mind. I'm just like, what is the easiest, fastest way to do this imperfectly? So now that I have this kind of set up, this is a little bit more demure, a little bit more, I don't want to say drab, but it's not as exciting over here in this corner. So I think what I want to do, I think that's a sign that I need to shift things around. So the first thing I'm going to do is move that one and this one. I think I'm going to take these two away for just a moment. And knowing that I need to create an empty space, that was one of my goals. That leaves these two right here, these two right here. These would be my, or this one, I suppose. I suppose if I had to call it, what would I say? This one feels like it wants to be higher or something. I just feel like it's a little, why does it seem like the bottom of the page is less fun? Like in general, why does the top of the page feel like it's the star of the show? Is that just me? Okay, so let's try it this way. So we're going to kind of try and brighten it up a little bit down here. I'm not married to this. This is kind of a new paper in my, I just got a little paper pad and I cut that one. So I'm not married to it. I'm totally willing to move things around a bit. I like to be a little careful how much floral I move into my layouts. I'd like to have a little bit of balance there. I kind of feel like that's fun. So that means this spot right here could be the empty spot. I wouldn't hate that. And then let me show you. So this is kind of how this works when you play this little game, because I gotta figure this out. Okay, I'm gonna shift this one out. I'm gonna shift this one in. It's a little bit more sunnier yellow, a little more fun. And then I'm looking through my pile. I'm gonna leave that one out. So how about this one? Bringing that one back in. And then I need something over here. Let me see. Nope. Let me see. Did I cut enough to give me options? That's the question. I like cutting images as well as like actual scrapbook paper. I like to have, you know, a lot of visual interest. So that's why I try to, you know, cut up magazines, all different kinds of things. I like to have a smorgasbord, if you will. Okay, so I like that. Or do I? See how you end up with this empty space as its own little hexagon in there? I like this, but then when it gets on there, it just starts to feel, maybe it's because the background is very dark, and that's what's kind of bumming me out. That doesn't work that way. I have this bright green, which is also fun. Does that help? I feel like that's a bit sunnier. That's a bit more cheerful. I think I'm a bit happier with things. This is an old pink paisley paper. It's fun kind of recognizing my papers still. Like I still remember what they're from. It's like they're famous. They're paper famous, and I still love them. I have a lot of fond feelings towards some of my papers, you know. Okay, let me see. Anything else? I didn't really get a chance to cut up as much paper as I would like, so I guess I'm just gonna have to live with. We want to make sure that we have all these little spots covered. So, like I was saying, I'm gonna have to live with certain things. That's a possibility. I feel like I'm adding a little bit too much of a little too much floral. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. So again, pretend I'm going to cut these ones right up the middle, so only parts of them are going to show, and then I need to find something. That one's going to get cut, these will get cut, those will get cut, and then the final little gaps will get filled in, I think. So like right here, I left a white space here, I left a white space there, and because this is so busy, I feel like you don't even notice they're necessarily empty. They just actually, when I look at it, it feels filled in, if that makes sense. So it's not terrible to leave little gaps. However, because the background is dark and not cream colored like this, I don't know if I don't feel like it blends in the same way, so I will probably try to fill in everything. So I took all that time to explain what I'm gonna do, and then we're gonna speed it up, play the music, because watching people glue is a little boring. But at least you know everything going on in my head, and the little challenge I had of me is trying to conform this to a certain size. I keep nice straight lines here. I'm going to be cutting these down, or maybe I will just glue that one on top, cut that one. So that's what you're going to see me do. You'll probably see me mess around a little bit more with it, because that's how I am. And then we'll see how it all turns out.
Whenever you're down, out in the cold, faithless and dark, stories untold. Come take my hand and walk there with me. I know a place where we can be free. There is a light shining for you, guiding your way, helping you through. And shadows and gloom are all that you see. We'll find a place where we can be free. From the mountain top down to the deepest valley, hear a voice calling you. It's the rising sun shining in the darkest alley. Can't you see you will be free? I have been far, I have been wide, searching for peace, somewhere to hide. Now I am free, open and pure, fearless and babe, I am secure. There is no dark that can't be lit. We'll find a way if we just commit. We are one. There is no them and us. Together we're strong. Together we're free. From the mountain top down to the deepest valley, hear a voice calling you. It's the rising sun shining in the darkest alley. Can't you see you will be free? Can't you see you will be free? You will be free.
Okay, so in true Cori fashion, I just realized that this paper on the back side is now upside down because I turned it around. Oh, and I can't even say that's the first time that's happened. I actually have dividers that I've made that have upside down. So some things in crafting, I guess you just have to accept. It's gonna be imperfect. Okay, so the baby pocket has the prompt for me this week is I decided to go with some favorite Bible words. So there's some words in the Bible that I just really love. They remind me of the story in the Bible they come from, or that parts that I remember, or I love the meanings of them. So knowing how many kind of like pieces I had to work with, I actually don't remember which ones I had decided that I was going to use. So I kind of have to do it over again, but that's okay. So let me kind of show you what I was thinking. So this is my empty space. So I'm going to draw an outline within here, like a little dotted one, to kind of create that look, that fake look that it's there. So like as an example, this green one, I'll have the word establish. Maybe the cork will have the word ecclesia. That's the Greek version of the word, which means gathering, congregation, the called out congregation. It was translated in the King James as what we know as the word church. Wilderness is another one. Usually that has a negative connotation, but I think for those of us who've spent time there, sometimes it can be a really great learning experience. So I love that word. Awe is another word. Obey is another one. So I'm going to stagger like what side of the hexagon that they're on. I love this one. Loving kindness. Suddenly, establish and remember. So I think on this one I wanted to put them on here with the kids. So remember, loving kindness is kind of a long word, so it definitely is going to need a big... And I'm wondering if suddenly, or actually loving kindness, maybe it's better off being on this one when I get that in there. Trying to decide what is suddenly, though. That's such a great word. In the Old Testament, when you're reading through the history books like Kings and Chronicles, Samuel's, you will get a real sense of the word suddenly. You see how often that concept is used, how God moves. So it's quite a word. So how I have this, you can see that I actually have that one. So I don't have to use that spot. I could use this one. Yeah, it's kind of like, what do I want to do? I also like the idea of kind of breaking them up so they're not so all together. But once they're going to get trimmed down and positioned, it might not be so bad. Maybe this will be better if I moved it up, like in the higher part of the thing there. I think that already looks better right there. I'll let her have loving kindness, and then maybe suddenly we'll be down here. So that's essentially what it's going to look like when I'm done, when I get those all in place. And then this will be the opposite side where it says list some favorite Bible words. Ta-da! So actually, I take back that ta-da because I have not earned that officially yet. I got to do the work first. Okay, so 2 steps here. One is getting the little words in place. That's step number 1. And then step number 2 is going to be going back over this and kind of like frosting it with the little, whether they're the stars, the dots, it's just adding on those little extras. I wish I had white ink because for my stamp pad, that would be so cool, is putting some white ink on there. But I did get it to the right date, the right year, all the right things. So I will probably find a way. I'll probably do it here in this corner. It's probably a good spot. Is date that. So let me see. Anything else? Anything else? Okay. So I'm going to go in here and start cutting and gluing again. Kind of boring stuff. So we'll just speed it along. Okay, so there's that. I could not get these little, this white pen to work for anything, but fortunately it decided to cooperate. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue that one on there. See, it suddenly worked. I think when you consider the different stories in the Bible that are meaningful to you, some of the events, attributes of God, there's some really amazing words that really stand out to me. I can say this, that obeying God, having obedience is a huge theme of the Old Testament. The New King James uses the word loving kindness in that translation. I don't know if I've seen it in any other, but that's primarily been my main translation for a very long time. I'm very familiar with it. I just think that word is amazing. Loving kindness. Obviously, the awe of God. If we look at, again, the Old Testament, how many people like fell to their face before him? So I definitely call that awe. I mentioned Ecclesia, the wilderness. I love the fact that it ended up with the camera in Bible Time, our show that we read the Bible. One of my little sayings I have is about taking a picture of scripture in the wild. Sometimes we become so familiar with certain verses because we've seen them on t-shirts and bumper stickers, and you've kind of lost its association with the passage it lives in, with the story it's from. So when we come across some of those well-known verses when we're reading the Bible, it's taking a picture of them is kind of the joke, because it's a scripture in the wild. It's been found. Take a picture. Establish. This is something that God had promised the Israelites that he would do, is establish them. He establishes us. I just think that's it's such an interesting word when you think of it from that context. So so these are some of the words. I was limited in my list because of, going about it with these shapes and wanting to kind of make it more artistic versus just straightforward, because making a list, just on a piece of paper would be perfectly acceptable. Absolutely nothing wrong with that idea. But since I was feeling a bit more adventurous, a bit more creative, I decided that that's what I would do, is just run with it, because there's plenty of times where I don't, and I don't actually do much. So I decided that I would pursue a more crafty approach to this one. Oh, so the first thing I need to do is date, because I have a feeling I will forget that. So let me get that out of the way. Make sure that's today's date. Okay, so now I have the proper date. I don't know if you guys noticed, but on one of the pocket arts that I did, and I ended up stamping it, I actually had the wrong year on there. Of course. Don't look at my videos too closely. Don't pause them and get up close to the screen, because you will be just disappointed. Don't do that. I love this green so much. It's my favorite green, and I feel like it always looks amazing on this. So I'm just gonna, I don't know, I'm gonna make an interesting, I don't ever do stuff like this. I'm just gonna make an interesting design. Well, I'm gonna make a design, let's put it that way. Okay, so there's that. Ooh, I have this arrow. This is like old Studio Calico, I think it's Studio Calico. This is a really super old. It's just been hanging out. I have like the remainders of this poor little arrow here. So it's probably from that, actually. It's the sticky part. Maybe that's what, some poor little arrow lost its sticky. So this is a good time to use my arrow. How about establish? The Lord established David as king, who was a warrior. I'm sure he used arrows. It's amazing what kind of storytelling you can do. This suddenly one, I feel like suddenly. The only problem with this is these are the wrong shade of gold. Okay, so I want to match this gold glitter and not have competing glitters. We don't want to do that. Let me flip this over, and I'm going to punch out 3 stars. Okay, now I have the proper little tool I'd mentioned in an earlier video that I had used an improper tool. So we're going to lay that against the surface of my glue stick. I need my surgical glasses. I'm just going to put that one down here for a minute. Dink. And then on this one, so the pattern I most love is when you kind of put 2 stars together close, and then one a little bit like different away from the other two. Okay, so something like that. Another thing that is fun to do is on the ones that are sort of split up the middle, those can be fun to kind of put something down. This particular one, the pattern in this blue paper already has kind of a dotted effect. So I feel like this green right here would be really cool. Kind of trying to decide which one I like the most. I think I like this green the most. And I want to move it so it's like more perfectly on the middle. Okay, let me get this one. I think they look best when they're a little bit closer together than too far apart. Okay. And then I have this little pack. This is a really old pack, but it's got this white. Okay, I'm not sure how I'm going to get this. There we go. Whoa, whoa. It's a little hard to get it straight. There's one, I don't even know if that's straight, but we're gonna pretend that it is, darn it. It's like these two chunky triangles, like it's an arrow almost pointing at them. Okay, and then sometimes it's fun to draw little weird offset rectangles around things. Okay, that one's kind of a slippery. That one was slippery. It sent me right off, which is, there's nothing wrong with that if you kind of like come off the edge. I think it looks kind of fun, and it's a little messy, much like we are. I've decided I really like it. It's like an offset line, and it feels like it adds this like really nice touch in my opinion. Try and decide what that is going to look like, so we'll just do it that way, like that. I have so many different fun little things on here. I'm not sure if I'm going overboard. Like, what are the rules with elements like this? Are you just allowed to go crazy? Are you just put things willy-nilly? I don't know. I just feel like this one's really plain. I don't know what to do about that, though. Or do I? I think the idea just came to me as the words were coming out of my mouth. So, let's see. Is orange the answer? Let's see. I already used that green up there. And green and red feel a little bit like Christmas to me, so I don't know if that's how. Let me try another color and let's compare which one we like better. Okay, I definitely think the orange one stands out. Alright, so I'm gonna put these. Of course, it's gonna get a little dicey when I'm gonna have this half shape. When you have like such a little, like these little spaces to work with, I think, I'll do one more. Obviously I can't cut these in half, so you gotta try to make it look a little like this one right here and this one right here. Obviously only a tiny fraction of that little dot should show. I think that's good. Okay, is anything standing out to me? I think, ooh. Okay, I think I'm trying to decide what can I do to fun it up? Is there anything else? Is this as fun as it gets? a little bit more art journaling that way. So if you were to zoom in close, which I'm not asking anyone to do, but if you were to zoom in close, you would see that like my line, it isn't perfect. You know, getting these, you know, on here, and it's an imprecise work. So, but for the most part, it looks like it's a straight line. That's what my eye sees. I'm good with that. You can see that there's a nice, comfortable amount of white space to work with here. So I'm pretty happy. This looks good. I think I'm going to call it quits, call it done. And then that's so far sliding in here. Yes, yes. We have an accord. Some of the corners of the hexagons are getting caught on here. Okay, there we go. It's in there. Okay, week number 6. List. Some favorite Bible words. Cha-ching. Really happy with that. I keep my list back here in this little extra pocket. Have a look. Next week we'll be looking at this upside down paper, but we'll have a good laugh. And this is this week's pocket. Yay! I'm happy with it. I managed to... It's good enough. It's good enough. Don't look too close. Anyway, you guys, I hope that you had fun with your pockets this week. That's what this is about. It's about doing this challenges also to encourage you to use your creative gifts. And I hope that you had a good time doing that. If you haven't joined me yet in the Pocket Art Challenge, it's super easy to get caught up. We're only in week 6. You could get away with just doing 6 pockets. So let's count it. What does that look like, Corey? So here's a pocket. That's 1. Here's another pocket. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You could just do a single pocket for each week, not like I'm doing, which is, you know, at this point I'm kind of doing like, at least 1 whole page and a half a page. That's kind of what I've been averaging so far. You don't have to do that. You can make it much easier on yourself if you are pressed for time, but you want to join the fun. This is a project meant to encourage our community and get you crafting consistently. And I am definitely got some videos in the works where I will show you what my setup looks like and how to make this easier and what kind of essentials would make the process go faster for you, because these are little works of art, and I would really want to encourage you to join in if you haven't already. It's a very fun, creative exercise, and who knows, you will probably surprise yourself. And once you've been doing it long enough, by the end of the year, imagine how much further you will be in your skills and your love for creating. And that's really what it's about. We have been given a creative gift from the Creator himself, and it's a wonderful thing to utilize, and that's what I want to help you do. So thank you so much for watching. Tell me in the comments below what was your list this week. What did you decide to do? And I will see you, my very sweet friend, in the next video. Love your little faces. Bye, everybody.
Have a good show, everybody.
Have a good show, everybody. 2020. Wrong book. That have upside down. So some things you just cannot, I can't think of the word. Mark, cut all this part out. I definitely think the orange one stands out. So what my thought was, and that just disappeared from my hand.
On your fingernail.
It's on my fingernail. Of course it is.